The United States faces the possibility of unprecedented political gridlock if the House of Representatives cannot elect a speaker in time for the certification of the presidential election. Under Article 1, Section 2 of the U.S. Constitution, the House must elect its speaker before conducting any other business, including committee organization and legislative actions. This procedural requirement also applies to certifying electoral votes on January 6th. Without a speaker, the House effectively cannot function, leaving the process of certifying the election in limbo. The most recent speaker election underscores the potential for drawn-out delays. Kevin McCarthy required 15 ballots to secure the position in early January 2023. Any attempt to install a temporary or acting speaker during such a delay would likely face constitutional challenges, as the rules explicitly mandate the election of a permanent speaker before transacting other business. Given these constraints, the House must resolve its leadership crisis promptly to avoid a constitutional impasse. Currently, the GOP holds a narrow majority of 219 to 215 seats, with Democrats expected to vote unanimously for Hakeem Jeffries. That leaves Republicans with little room for defections. Representative Tom Massey of Kentucky has already declared his opposition to Mike Johnson, the leading Republican candidate. Additionally, Representative Kay Granger of Texas is reportedly unable to vote due to health issues, reducing the GOP's effective majority. With just one more defection, Johnson could fail to secure the speakership. Freedom Caucus members like Andy Harris and Chip Roy have also signaled reluctance to support Johnson, without significant concessions. Victoria Spartz of Indiana has complicated matters further by announcing her intent to avoid caucusing with Republicans or serving on committees, effectively distancing herself from the party's legislative agenda. These dynamics create a precarious situation for Johnson and make it uncertain whether he can secure the votes needed to become Speaker, especially in the first few rounds of voting. Should Johnson fail to secure the speakership within the first few ballots, Republicans could face prolonged negotiations similar to McCarthy's ordeal. Johnson's willingness to make substantial concessions to the Freedom Caucus may ultimately determine his viability as a candidate. However, such compromises could weaken his authority, leaving him vulnerable to the same challenges that plagued McCarthy's tenure. For instance, McCarthy's agreement to allow any member to call for a vote to remove the speaker ultimately led to his ouster. Johnson may face similar pressures if he concedes too much to secure support. If the House remains deadlocked, the inability to certify the election on January 6th could create a constitutional crisis. Contrary to speculation, this scenario would not automatically extend the terms of President Joe Biden or Vice President Kamala Harris. Instead, the Presidential Succession Act of 1947 stipulates that the President pro tempore of the Senate would assume the presidency until the House resolves its leadership crisis and certifies the election results. Currently, that position is held by 91-year-old Senator Chuck Grassley of Iowa. While the prospect of President Grassley may seem far-fetched, recent political turbulence has demonstrated that previously unimaginable scenarios can quickly become reality. The January 6th insurrection, repeated challenges to electoral processes, and judicial rulings expanding executive authority have all pushed constitutional boundaries in ways few anticipated. Grassley's potential ascent underscores the importance of resolving the speaker election swiftly to maintain stability and uphold democratic norms. Historically, the United States has faced contentious speaker elections, but the current political environment heightens the stakes. The polarization within the Republican Party, combined with the narrow majority and procedural requirements, creates a volatile situation. If Johnson cannot unify his party, Republicans may need to consider alternative candidates or risk prolonged gridlock. The possibility of Democrats gaining the speakership through Republican defections remains unlikely but cannot be entirely dismissed. Such a scenario would require a small number of Republicans to cross party lines and vote for Jeffries, a move that could alienate their base and invite primary challenges. Given the current political climate, most Republicans are unlikely to take such a step, opting instead to continue negotiations within their own party. Even if Johnson ultimately prevails, the concessions required to secure votes may undermine his authority, making it difficult to govern effectively. The Freedom Caucus has already demonstrated its willingness to challenge leadership, and Johnson's need to appease this faction could lead to further instability. The risk of repeated votes to remove the speaker may persist, perpetuating dysfunction within the House. Should the deadlock extend beyond January 6th, the focus will shift to the Senate, where leadership has already been established. With Grassley as the president pro tempore, he would temporarily assume the presidency under the succession rules. This arrangement, while legally sound, could spark political controversy and further erode public confidence in government institutions. Grassley's advanced age and the temporary nature of his potential presidency raise additional concerns about governance and continuity. While the Senate's leadership structure provides a fallback option, it is not designed to handle prolonged crises. The situation highlights the fragility of the current political landscape and the urgent need for bipartisan cooperation to prevent procedural breakdowns. The speaker election is not merely a partisan struggle but a test of the country's ability to maintain functional governance amid polarization. Republicans must weigh the long-term implications of their internal divisions and consider the broader consequences of failing to elect a speaker in time for certification. The Democratic Party's unity behind Jeffries offers a stark contrast, underscoring the challenges facing the GOP. In light of these dynamics, observers should prepare for multiple ballots and extended negotiations. Johnson's flexibility may enable him to secure the position, but his willingness to compromise could shape the trajectory of his speakership. Meanwhile, the specter of President Grassley serves as a reminder of the unforeseen outcomes that can arise from political dysfunction. As the January 6th deadline approaches, the urgency of resolving the speaker election cannot be overstated. The House's ability to function and the integrity of the electoral process depend on swift action. Failure to act could plunge the country into uncharted territory, testing constitutional limits and straining public trust. This unfolding drama highlights the importance of stable leadership and effective governance. Whether Johnson can navigate the internal dynamics of his party or whether Republicans will need to consider alternative candidates remains to be seen. In the meantime, the possibility of a temporary presidency under Grassley looms as a stark reminder of the stakes involved. The coming weeks will be critical in determining the trajectory of American politics. With the clock ticking, the pressure is on House Republicans to resolve their leadership crisis and ensure the orderly certification of the election. The outcome will not only shape the next Congress, but also set the tone for the nation's political future.